Praise be to Jesus Christ and welcome to Catholic Forum. I'm your guest host, Alan Dunst, and we want to thank you for being with us today. And we hope that our little conversation here in West Michigan finds you wherever you may be and draws you a little bit closer to Jesus Christ through his one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. Our guest today is going to kind of discuss his journey through the church and away from the church and back to the church, and also kind of discuss a love of literature that something of a lost art, and we're going to kind of explore a little bit about the Catholic themes in literature. So we hope you'll enjoy the conversation. So joining me today is Patrick Cook.
Hi, Alan, how are you?
Good to have you with us.
Thanks.
You can just put that down on the side there if you're honored.
Okay, I can do that. All right.
We're nothing if not professional around here. So Patrick, thanks so much for being with us.
I'm very happy to be here.
Now, you were raised Catholic?
Absolutely, yep. I'm the oldest of a family of 8.
Okay.
My father's the oldest of the oldest boy in a family of 7, so we had a good Catholic family. So my mom was a convert. Actually, my aunt was her roommate at Western and converted her, my father's sister.
Oh.
And then when she came home with her buddy now, Aunt Joe, there was handsome young Lieutenant Patrick going off to the war, so they got married. Well, so they raised us all. You know, there were 8 of us. They raised us all as Catholic. We went to St. Francis here in town, St. Francis Xavier, and then I went to Catholic Central. And then to Quincy College. Quincy College is a Franciscan school in Quincy, Illinois. Oh, okay. Quite old school, 1850s. Oh. It's older than Notre Dame, even.
Interesting.
A lot smaller, but older. Well, somehow the people I hung out with and the people who I admired at school were apostates, basically. They just didn't believe it anymore. They were disgusted by one thing and another. This was the mid-60s. It was there was a lot of things going on in the church which many of us at the college were all for. You know, they're terrific. You know, we have Mass in English. We have, you know, relaxed rules of fasting and all that sort of thing. But others just didn't, that wasn't enough for them. If it wasn't, you know, they didn't believe in God, so it's kind of hard to be a Catholic, you know.
Right.
So I kind of went along with that. And after Quincy, I was in the Navy. And I saw some examples of faith there, especially when we went to the Philippines. That's a very Catholic country. And you would see, you know, May Day processions going through this incredibly corrupt town along a post city. But there were a lot of people who weren't corrupt, and it was pretty nice there. So I kind of got an idea of what Catholicism was like in a Catholic country. Rather, do you know what I'm saying? Even though I wasn't really attending Mass or anything, it was just kind of, oh boy, yeah, this is different. So I came home from the Navy, and I went to school at the University of Illinois, and then to Northeastern University, where I got an MA in American literature, or English literature, really, and taught for a little while. Still not attending church or the sacraments or anything. The only thing, I'd go with my mom to midnight mass when I came home from we lived in Boston and then Vermont. So, you know, that's about the extent of my Catholicism. Then we came home because we knew we were never going to afford a house in New England on our meager salaries. And that was good. I went to work for the Catholic Human Development Office here in town. And at first we worked in the jail ministry. I still wasn't very faithful to my childhood religion. But then I started working in the refugee resettlement area. And we were still resettling Vietnamese boat people, but it was their families, you know, so they were coming over. But we had plenty of other refugees because it was early 80s. Poland was in trouble. All they had was the Solidarity activists were in jail. The army took over, so it didn't even have the fake democracy that it used to have. It's just, you know, it was martial law. And the only institutions that were actually working were the Catholic Church and the military government. Well, the people who came here, the refugees, were way better Catholics than I ever thought of being. I mean, some of them were very faithful indeed, and went to confession regularly and tried to live up to the church doctrine and so on. And then we resettled some Ethiopian families. Now they weren't, well, some of them were Catholic actually, the ones from Eritrea, but they're mostly Orthodox. But they had such faith. I remember a real impressive night where we were talking to a woman named Kibra, sitting on a couch in her living room, one candle on the coffee table. And she was telling us that her husband was captured because they were Eritrea was in rebellion against Ethiopia. Her husband was captured, and the rebels broke into the jail and set everyone free. Well, of course, they had to flee, right? Well, all those people, they just zipped across the border. And because they'd have been killed if they were caught. So they all went to Sudan. So Kibra and her family, her children, marched across a desert with 3 guerrilla armies going back and forth, got to Sudan and found her husband in one of the camps.
My goodness.
And I said, well, how in the world did you do that? She said, well, my faith. I believed in God. I thought God was going to help me. Well, I was in a situation, or, I saw all around me. It wasn't my situation, but I saw it all around me. Geez, if a guy lost a job, that was the end of his marriage. They couldn't hold anything together. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I want some of that solid faith, that strength that comes from a real belief. And of course, I was raised in that kind of a solid faith, so I started going back to church and back to the sacraments, and pretty soon I was a regular Catholic again. And it was just a lot better. I had more, I had something solid to back up my other forms of craziness. So it worked a lot better for me. And I've kept it up pretty much now. I've been going to church ever since, and doing what I'm supposed to do. Mm-hmm. So it's been a big help. Instead of falling apart, I went to AA. I quit smoking. That was on Fat Tuesday. I had my last cigarette at midnight on Fat Tuesday, and then 1984, and never smoked again. And I had my last drink on Fat Tuesday in 1985, and never drank again.
Oh, awesome.
One of the things that always worried me was what would happen if we had a child and something happened. You had to take the kid to an emergency room, as you frequently do with children.
Mm-hmm, sure.
And I was drunk. What? It'd be terrible. They'd take the child away from me and call Child Protective Services. So sure enough, we had our baby in 1986, a year later. Sure enough, she broke her leg at daycare.
Oh, no.
And we went off to the emergency room. We finally figured out that something was really wrong, and we took her to the emergency room. And I wasn't drunk, so it
paid off.
Yeah. I just that was really a big fear I had. So there you go. So anyway, so that I've had real helps with that, and been able to do some things and read Catholic literature, which of course we studied, and because a lot of literature is Catholic. Let's face it, but. Study it with a new depth and a new appreciation for what was going on there. So
right.
Anyway,
so can we talk about you said a lot of literature is Catholic, and and as you said, some people may not realize the strands of Catholicism that are woven through the history of literature.
Yes. Goodness.
So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I just read a wonderful book called It's called Will in the World, and it's about the kind. We don't know much about Shakespeare, but we know a lot about what was going on in England at the time. There was persecution of the church by both Henry VIII and Elizabeth. Sometimes the magistrate in Stratford, where Shakespeare lived, was a real strict evangelical Puritan, I guess, and that made things tough for anybody who was a Catholic. And there are hints of all kinds that Shakespeare at least retained some of his Catholic faith. Nobody says he was a practicing Catholic, but he was certainly a person who missed the Catholic Church, who missed the ritual, who missed the beauty and richness of the ritual.
So we know that he was actually raised in the Catholic faith?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So, many times. The guy in the book, now this is all speculation on his part, but what he was saying was Shakespeare had to go home from London to Stratford because first his son died, Hamlet, his son was named, and then his father died. And the kind of stripped bare funeral arrangements just offended him, because there's none of the masses, there was none of the wakes, there was none of the feasting. It was just kind of, bless you, my son, hope you go to heaven, put you in the ground, because they were Puritans. So that's at least partly why this author thought that a lot of what's going on in Hamlet is Hamlet's rage at the poverty-stricken rites for his father's funeral and for Ophelia's funeral. Why these maimed rites? Well, geez, she committed suicide. Hamlet's upset. Or when his father died, they had the wedding feast they had the wedding of his mother and his uncle way too fast for Shakespeare's for Hamlet's taste. So there was something about that he thought, he couldn't come right out and say, why don't we have masses and all that sort of thing, but it's clear in the book. Well, it was a very interesting book, and I kind of enjoyed that. And there was in the wars of religion going back and forth, there were a lot of conversions and conversions back, so that, it was pretty rough in the 17th century. It really was. In England. In America, Catholicism was just not allowed. The Pilgrims may have come here for religious freedom, but they didn't want to give anybody else any.
Not anyone else's.
The Quakers had to move, the Baptists had to move, and the Catholics never could even show up. So it was tough. And when American literature started to get away from just being an echo of English literature, there was some anti-Catholicism. Edgar Allan Poe, the author of The Pit and the Pendulum, all these elaborate tortures of the Inquisition, which, the Inquisition tortured people. It was mostly waterboarding. It didn't have anything to do with big pendulums going on. And, because that was their image of Catholicism. This was the thing there. But a subtle change started to come over American literature when it dealt with Catholics. I'm thinking of Herman Melville's Benito Cereno, which is a real story. He used a lot of actual fact. A ship captain, Captain Delano, the family was related to the Franklin Delano Roosevelt. They were that old an American family. And there was a ship that looked like it was in trouble. The sails were all ragged and so on. So they boarded the ship. And there weren't very many sailors aboard. There was a lot of slaves aboard, but there was the captain and a few other guys. But Delano was kind of this innocent American. He didn't think much of it. And what had actually happened is that the slaves had risen up, killed most of the sailors, and they were running things, but they were acting as if they were still slaves. And nonchalantly shaving the captain with this sharp razor. And when it finally happens that they catch on, the American sailors catch on and fight. Now this happens, 1802, 1803. And they restore the captain to his command. And then Delano still doesn't get over his American innocence. He just thinks, well, these kinds of things happen, but I'm an American. I grew up on the beach in Duxbury, and these kinds of things don't touch me. Forgetting, of course, that there was plenty of slavery in the United States at the time, which he could easily have been against, but it just didn't happen. Benito Cereno is a Catholic. He feels so bad about this evil that he's part of and that the slaves rose up against, that he just quits sailing and joins a monastery. And it seems to me that, well, not just to me, but I've read scholarship on this. Melville is saying, look, you can't hide behind your innocence. You're supposed to do something about this. You're a captain. You're a leader. Come on, do your job. But he's also saying to Benito Cereno, come on, you can't hide behind your guilt. Oh, sure, the world is evil, so you go to the monastery. Oh, no, you got to stay and fight for the right.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is, because it's a real depth in the story. And so that's kind of interesting, I thought. And then I talked a little bit about the Marble Faun, Nathaniel Hawthorne's work when he was American consul in Rome in the 1850s. That was when there was still papal states. Garibaldi hadn't unified Italy yet. But he was consul there, and he knew this little American artist colony. So he wrote a book about their adventures and loves and so on. And it's quite sympathetic to Catholicism in it. For a Puritan or son of a Puritan, he's. One of his ancestors was one of the witch judges, for goodness sake. So you'd think, but no, he said, this is very, and he was particularly impressed with Marianism, with the Marian devotion. In fact, to show how pure the American Puritan artist woman was, Hilda is her name, her apartment comes with the obligation to keep up a little Marian shrine out in the hall, keep the candle going and she does that very faithfully. So he's trying to associate the purity of the Blessed Virgin with her purity.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and it was. Yeah. Of course, there's a funny little story there. He had his daughter Rose with him, Rose Hawthorne, and of course she was being raised mainly by Italian maids, because that's how it was back then. And at one point, they're walking along in the Vatican gardens, and she, taking a Sunday stroll, and little Rose runs smack into Pius IX and just about knocks him over. Yeah. And he, blessed her and went on. And Hawthorne worried a little. Boy, there's a lot of Catholic influence here. Well, Rose did become a Catholic. Oh. And skipping over what happened, she started the Hawthorne Dominicans. She founded a convent, asked her friend Emma Lazarus, Emma Lazarus, give us your poor, your tired, your huddled masses, that poet. Oh. And she said that the big ministry you could have here is these slum children are, with big tumors and so on, are being outcast. They throw them out in the street. They think they're the devil's children or something. And you could really be a big help taking care of them. And the Hawthorne Dominicans still do it to this day.
My goodness.
And there's a cause for Rose's canonization.
Oh, my goodness.
Well, I pray for it every day because I think that's a great idea. Well, so, and we go on. The Damnation of Theron Ware is the name of the book, and it's by Harold Frederick. It's not a real well-known book, but if you study American literature, it's kind of interesting.
About what time period was that?
Around 1880s, 1890s, something like that. And it's a little town where a minister comes to a new church, and he's walking around his area, and there's a construction site, and everybody's gathered around, and some poor fella has fallen off the scaffolding and cracked his head, and the priest is there giving last rites, and it's so impressive to Theron Ware. Oh my God, I've never heard Latin like that. That's just it trips right off his tongue. And then the construction company head has a beautiful daughter, a beautiful red-haired Irish daughter, I might add. And Theron gets kind of interested in her. And he kind of goes off the deep end. He's not sophisticated enough to be a Catholic, but he's too sophisticated to still be a Protestant. He just ends up taking off because, and Frederick has a solution. Look, we could get a little more cultured. We could listen. We could have better hymns, for example, in our church. And he shows the way to that. So it's kind of let's look at Catholicism because there's a lot of beauty there and a lot of interest.
Interesting. One quintessentially American author that I understand wrote significant Catholic work was Mark Twain. He wrote a biography on Joan of Arc.
That's right. Yes. And that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because I don't know if Mark Twain was exactly an atheist, but he certainly wasn't a religious person, really. And George Bernard Shaw wrote a play about Joan of Arc, because that's kind of a sticking point. How did this girl have enough charisma to lead armies? What was it about her? And it's a mystery for them because, wow, this is just not supposed to happen. Even if they don't believe her faith was anything but her own nutty conviction. Well, it worked. She led the army and saved the country. That's why I think the two of them wrote about her because, most of what Mark Twain wrote was just, poo-pooed religion of all kinds.
Yeah.
So
I hear that actually that work was what he considered his best or his favorite.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh,
so he spent, from what I hear, like 10 years on it. It's kind of.
It's interesting, isn't it? Some things he wrote just seemed to fly off his pen, and some things were really hard. He gave up on Huckleberry Finn almost at the end, and then finished it 5 years later because he didn't know how to end the story.
So, in your opinion, give us some. If our viewers wanted to pick up some good Catholic authors whose true Catholicism has permeated their work and maybe not necessarly, turned it into a tract, but
we're not just limiting ourselves to American literature here.
No, we can go where we want.
What I like is, in both these authors, George Bernanos and Francois Mauriac, is they don't write nice stories about little Catholic villages that do the right thing by their people and make up for whatever injustices there are. They write about towns with no priest, no religion, and show how vicious and spiritually dead they are. So it's not so much look how great Catholicism is, but look how bad complete secularism is. It could get really terrible.
So who were those people again?
George Bernanos.
How's that spelled?
Bernanos.
Okay, Bernanos.
He wrote a lot, really. But that Diary of a Country Priest is so great because it is a young fellow. It's his first parish. He's trying really hard to, practice his ministry properly. And oh boy, he's got some bad ones there. And he dies thinking he's a failure, and he isn't.
Oh,
his work works in them, and they actually
the
change.
seeds were sown, and then they just came.
So it's beautiful. It really is.
Yeah.
The Mauriac novel I'm thinking of, New Mistinguett, maybe, I can't remember, but it's a town with no priest and no religion, and there's this little girl who's a kind of an outcast. They call her the Rat, because she's a skinny little 14-year-old with a broken home, I guess. And she gets raped, and she doesn't know where to go with it. The man who raped her was prominent in the town. She doesn't know who to go to. There isn't anybody to go to, really. Right. And she gets an overwhelming sense that purity has been violated. So what she does is slide into the ice cold spring and drown herself, just to wash this terrible thing away. So it's like somebody who has an idea of a natural religion, really. And so that one has to think that the suicide was probably forgiven, you know. And we don't know what happens in heaven, but it sounds to me like that's the sort of thing that really could easily be. And so those two authors, Mauriac got the Nobel Prize. I don't think Bernanos did, but they were big in France in the day when France could still have Catholic authors that were prominent. And you know, if they give you a Nobel Prize, then you're pretty high up in the hierarchy.
Right.
So those two, and of course I like Waugh, because again he shows a Catholicism horribly maimed in Brideshead Revisited by sin and various kinds of depravity, but they're holding on to their Catholicism. It won't let them go. Look at Graham Greene, who was a terrible Catholic, really, but certainly felt bad about it, and his books try to reconcile him with the faith. A Burnt Out Case, for example. That's one where he goes to a leper colony.
So it sounds like your tastes run toward the kind of the argument of the negative.
Yes, exactly. The via negativity. Yes,
Negative
exactly.
examples,
Because that's where you see the truth really shine. It's in the darkness. You know, hey, if everybody's just going along beautifully and not having any problems, then it's pap. It's just not. It's not real. It is a problem, and keeping your faith up is a difficult thing. And I like to see books where that happens, where you see the real full problem. I don't know how spiritual it is, but Joseph Pieper on Hope was what consolidated my reversion, as you said.
Okay.
I read that and I said, "Oh, okay. It's not about conviction. You know, that you're, oh boy, you know, I'm saved now. But it's also not about despair. It's, you know, it's hope. It's a good thing, and it's got humility and it's got magnanimity with it. You know, and yeah.
And that seems to be almost a theme from some of these authors you mentioned, that hope that they see in the church, or the absence of hope without it.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
That's just what it is.
Yeah. It's been fascinating. We really want to thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you. It's terrific.
And we hope that you'll join us again as well. And in the meantime, we wish God's blessing upon you in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Qui ante conter